We are almost live here. You got me? We are good to go. Welcome into the Behind the Wall pregame show. We are at Campus Stakes right now, here every home game, Fridays, 3 to 4 p.m. Go ahead and stop by Campus Stakes also Sundays after home games. After the home game against Illinois tomorrow night, Bo Prabula, quarterback, will be in Campus Stakes Sunday morning, 10 to 11 a.m., signing his signature cups. If you do not know, we have came out, Campus Stakes and me have teamed up with the Penn State football team to come out with a player cup for every single home game. They have a signature cup. Think back to 90s when they had Michael Jordan, Barry Bonds, those type of guys, and they came out with those signature cups. You got to collect them. We decided to do the same thing, except with Penn State football players. So that is available at Campus Stakes, at Student Bookstore, and online at the Student Bookstore. So come on out Sunday morning and see Bo Prabula get anything you want signed. But let's get into we are live on YouTube as well. If anybody wants to stop through, we are doing Q&As. Leave any questions in the comment section. That is at Behind the Wall with Landon Tangwall. So come on through, stop by Campus Stakes if you are in town. But let's get into what we're going to talk about today. And I want to talk a little bit about the whiteout. Now, there was a lot of questions about that after the Kent State game. Coach Franklin, still sweaty-headed, headed to the post-game press conference and called for whiteout energy. And a lot of people were curious what that was. We still don't really know, but it was, and Coach Franklin has now clarified since in saying that he did not want to get in trouble and ask for an official whiteout because they are not allowed to do a second whiteout. And I have asked a couple sources, and I was curious on this. Are you allowed to do a second whiteout? And the answer to that is yes. There's no rule against it. Now, I think why one of the reasons Penn State doesn't want to do it is because it dilutes the whiteout a little bit. And I think we're all obviously a little bit sad, mad, whatever you want to call it, just because the whiteout was now scheduled for Washington. It's in November. It's going to be a little bit cold. But now whiteout, smear Illinois on the field. I love it. We're going to bring it to them tomorrow. So, the big thing about having two whiteouts is it takes away from how extraordinary the whiteout really is. And when you take something that's extraordinary and do it over and over, it becomes ordinary and it's no longer extraordinary. So I think that's the one thing that Penn State wants to keep with the whiteout is the fact that it is the greatest thing in all of sports. It is something that people come from all over. You see the whiteout videos go viral all over social media. So it's like, hey, we start to do whiteouts every single game. Well, it loses a little bit of its lust. It's hard to do that. So I think that is the one reason why Coach Franklin and company are a little bit not scared, but don't want to lean all the way into the whiteout. Now, and I will say we do a couple things. The helmet stripe game where there is just one stripe of blue and the rest of the stadium is pretty much all white. That's pretty much a whiteout. So we've kind of already started to go down that route. But I also think you want to be careful going down the route of just constantly throwing out a whiteout for any big game, because now is Ohio State a whiteout? Next we got a couple other big games. You don't know who's going to start to step up. So there is definitely something to kind of keep an eye on if we continue to make whiteouts something that happen more and more frequently. Franklin Fanatic in the comment section said, I wouldn't mind it being a student thing outside the main whiteout show. Well, it's funny you bring that up. So that's actually how the first whiteout began. Guido, who is kind of the founder of the whiteout, started going around campus. And he said, we're going to do a student-led whiteout. This is back in the early 2000s. And this is before social media. So now, it was real easy for Coach Franklin to come out and say, hey, we are having a whiteout, put it all out over social media. And spread it. It was all over Twitter, Instagram, Facebook within the hour. Well, back down, in the early 2000s, that wasn't a thing. So Guido was going around on a golf cart, and he had picket fences that he was sticking in the ground that said "Wear white" on Saturday. He was handing out white shirts. He had students, and he had a big horn, and he was screaming "Wear white" all over Thursday, Friday, all over the streets going to class. And that is how the first whiteout came about. Then the fans kind of got into it as well with the students. And that is how the whiteout originated. But I think the one cool thing about this whiteout is it's not as commercialized. Now, there still obviously is, Ryan Mock said, wasn't it for the 2005 Ohio State game? I think you're right. I believe that was it. I'd have to double check that. And that was, obviously the Tamba game where he had the sack, put Ohio State's quarterback on their head. Some legendary moments from those early 2000s. But I think the cool thing about this weekend is we can kind of go back to like a grassroots whiteout where it's not all about the money. There's not all these extra. I mean, I'm sure Student Bookstore and Family Clothesline, shout out Student Bookstore, friend of the show, sponsor of the show. They're going to be selling a ton of white gear. I will say that. But at the same time, it's not, these TV deals. They make these deals around the whiteout. There's a reason why, Troy Smith, tumbleweed. Troy Smith was the quarterback that Tom Bahali pretty much put on his head to end that game against Ohio State in 2005. So that was a classic moment. But, I am curious. And then Brett Bielema came out, the Illinois head coach, and he said, whiteout energy, whatever the heck that is. But after that, he had a lot of really nice things to say about the Penn State staff as a whole. Even said some things about Joe Paterno, Sue Paterno, that type of thing, and showing a lot of love to the Penn State family. So I'm excited. I think there is definitely a lot of respect between Brett Bielema, Illinois as a whole, and this Penn State team. It felt a little bit like the West Virginia game. There was definitely a little bit of animosity headed into that game, and I think it was tension that kind of built up from the whole offseason, and you get tired as players constantly going against your teammates, and you get a little bit testy. So you want to go up against someone that's in different colors than you. So I think that's where some of the animosity with West Virginia kind of came about. Excuse me, a lot of radio shows this week. If you've been following along, I think I've been on live on Fox about 5 times so far. We got another 3 shows to go. So it should be fun. Stay along with me. Turn on notifications on YouTube, and you will stay up to date every single time I go live in and around Penn State Stadium. Illinois wants a fight, and they got one, says Franklin Fanatic. I agree with you, man. I'm excited. I was going to talk about some other stuff, but let's kind of get into Illinois real quick. So obviously the last time we played Illinois at home for homecoming, it was 2021. And that was a rough one. I was a freshman. I'll never forget. I was on the sideline. We lost in 9 overtimes. And it was probably the most embarrassed I've ever been as a football player walking off a field. So I think there's a little bit of that in the back of Coach Franklin's head when he called for the whiteout. He's kind of saying, hey, we need all the reinforcements we can get. I do not want to have a repeat of what happened in 2021. So I think there was a little bit of that. But trust me, everybody's talking about that a little bit. That is not lost on Coach Franklin. But let's talk about this Illinois team as a whole. Their quarterback, Luke Altmaier, last year against Penn State had 163 yards passing and 4 interceptions. So needless to say, this is not someone that has excelled really all last year or Penn State in his career. Sorry, folks. Like I said, these a lot of radio shows getting to me. I need to ask Steve Jones for some tips on how to keep the throat nice and slick, man, something like that. So let's get back into this Illinois team, though. Luke Altmaier really did struggle a lot last year, and now he is coming into this year. He has 10 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. That is the only quarterback in all of college football with that stat line. So to the naked eye, when you're looking at the stats, it's like, okay, Luke Altmaier, he's here. He has arrived. He is an elite quarterback now. Well, I've watched a lot of tape, and I don't know if I would really go that far. I think, number one, how they have played 2 ranked teams up to this point. Thank you so much, Michael. One of my cameramen just handed me some ice water, so it means a lot. The throat needs a little bit of lubrication right now. All right, so let's continue talking a little bit about Luke Altmaier. And, from what I've seen from him, he is a one-read quarterback. And what that means is he predetermines where he is going to go with the ball. Before the snap, he knows, hey, I got a one-on-one with the cornerback and my favorite wide receiver. I am going to throw there no matter what. And you see that a lot out of Luke Altmaier. You also see him, he takes what the defense gives him. And that, kind of reminds me of the Penn State offense from last year. If you think about it, it was a lot of underneath stuff. It was, hey, let's find guys that are just a little bit open. And on the flip side of that, Andy Kotelnicki is the opposite. He's, how can we scheme guys open? How can we make the defense uncomfortable and put them in bad situations? But that's kind of what Luke Altmaier is doing, is saying, hey, whatever the defense gives us, I'm taking it. If the flat is open, that's where I'm going to look first, and that's where I'm going to put the ball. And that is what we've seen a lot from Luke Altmaier up to this point. So he is kind of, put it this way, he has one thing in his mind at once. He does not do good processing a lot of things. So I think there is an opportunity for the Penn State defense and Tom Allen to throw a couple things at Luke Altmaier. And, he's played some good teams. Kansas was ranked when Illinois beat them in, I believe it was week 1 or week 2, and they kind of showed them up. And then they just obviously played Nebraska last week on Friday night, went to Nebraska and were underdogs in the sea of red. Matt Rule in his second year, and Dylan Raiola is a quarterback that many think is somewhat of the next Patrick Mahomes. And they went to overtime, but Illinois really handled business, and this defense looked solid. Luke Altmaier came out right away and was slinging the ball. They went down instantly and scored on that Nebraska defense. Now, I don't think this Nebraska defense is anything close to what Luke Altmaier is going to see tomorrow against Penn State and what Tom Allen has schemed up for him. And just off the plain fact that Penn State has better players than Illinois has. I mean, that's just the simple truth. We recruit better. There's a reason why we're normally better. But Illinois, obviously, like you said, they have put together a really good team. And Luke Altmaier is thought to be a great quarterback, and I think he's good. He's been efficient, and he has been incredibly safe. I will give him that. Like I said, 10 touchdowns to no interceptions. But it kind of reminds you think about Drew Aller's stat line last year, 25 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. And people weren't really pleased with that. They were saying, hey, I don't think he's good enough. He's not stretching the field. He's not taking enough risk. And kind of say that about Luke Altmaier up to this point. So I'm excited to see how Tom Allen and company are going to put him at a disadvantage, throw a couple things at him that you haven't shown on tape yet. But also, Illinois is going to come in and try to run the ball. Now, if you know, in 2021, and I talked about this earlier, we lost them in 9 overtimes. And the way that happened is Illinois didn't have a quarterback. I mean, he did. He was out there, but he wasn't doing much. They ran the ball the entire game. They put 7 to 8 offensive linemen on the field at once. And obviously, if you don't know, normally there's only 5 out there. So they were adding 2-3 extra offensive linemen, and they were just running it down our throat and saying, hey, you better stop the run. And we did not do it. And that was obviously a hard day for Brent Pry and company. But looking at it now, I don't think there is any difference of how Illinois is going to come in. They're going to want to throw the ball a little bit more, but because of what Luke Altmaier presents up so far this year. But they also have a really good running game. Caden Fagan is 6'3", 250 at running back. That is basically the size of Derrick Henry. Now, he doesn't run the same as Derrick Henry. He's not nearly as good. But you have a veteran offensive line in Illinois and a running back that is that big, Derrick Henry size. That's something to keep an eye on, and you don't want to let him get downhill, especially against a team where you now lost KJ Winston. So you're down there. Now you're having to put Jalen Reed is someone that you could have had in and around the line of scrimmage. Well, now Jalen Reed has to go back and play KJ Winston's position. You also, when you lose KJ, we saw Dejon Lane, the true freshman, play a ton last week. And it's like, okay, that's cool. And he's going to be great. And we came into the season and Coach Franklin said, hey, this kid is not going to redshirt. He doesn't need it. We're going to use him right away. Well, now he's being utilized a lot more than he thought he was going to have to play because of KJ Winston's injury. But now it kind of limits what Tom Allen is able to do, because now you look at it and say, okay, losing KJ Winston, that hurts. But not only is he a leader, but he's someone on the back end of the defense that is the best player on the field. And when you have that on the back end, it's nice because as Abdul, as Denai, linebackers, Kobe King, they're thinking in their head, if I mess up, I got KJ Winston behind me. He can kind of make up for that a little bit. As good as Dejon Lane is, and he's a young freshman, he just doesn't have the experience or the knowledge to be able to play like KJ Winston does. So I think you're a little bit limited there. And then on top of that, you are without Dom DeLuca this weekend. So, and someone just asked David Bartner in the comments, should we play Abdul at linebacker? I think that's definitely a question to be had, especially with Dom DeLuca out at the Sam position. That is something that Abdul has played in the past. He's played a little bit of Sam and Will, both outside linebackers. But at the same time, I guess it kind of begs the question, do you lean on your pass rush? And Abdul Carter and then Dennis Sutton both got their first sacks of the year last week against Kent State. And I think that helps mentally kind of move you along, because you go through the first 2 weeks without any type of sacks, and you're supposed to, Abdul and Denai, they're both thought of as possible first-round talents. So when you go through and you play a Bowling Green and a West Virginia where their offensive lines aren't necessarily that good, it's like, okay, what's going on? And it starts to kind of get into your mental space a little bit. Now they got a lot of pressure, and coach against West Virginia, and then Coach Franklin came out after Bowling Green and he said, hey, there was a clear emphasis from Bowling Green to not let our D-line get in the game, meaning they were getting the ball out within 2 seconds every single time. So that is how you take away a pass rush, as you get the ball out quick. But I think it was really nice for Denai and Abdul to start to get those sacks, start to feel a little bit of swag, a little mojo creep into them. But I think we're going to need them this weekend. So I get the thought of putting Abdul at linebacker, and I think he'll play a little bit of both. I think he will continue to bounce around, but I think he is better suited at the DN position, and let him just hunt that quarterback. Let him deny, because you take Abdul away, and now, okay, you put in Smith Filbert, and that's someone that has been effective up to this point, but he's not Abdul, and then you don't have to worry about him as much. So the big upside to having Abdul and Denai on the field at the same time is that it's hard to game plan for both of them. You can't double team both of them, so one of them has to get your attention. The other one has a one-on-one situation. So I mean, I'll tell you, I watched the Illinois offensive line. They're a solid group up front. Those tackles, they're good, but there is definitely some opportunity for our defensive ends to take advantage of their offensive line. And Luke Altmaier does like to hold on the ball a little bit. I told you he does go to his first read pretty often, but there are times he'll hold on that ball and give the defensive line an opportunity to kind of get after him a little bit. Franklin Fanatic in the comment section on YouTube said, "We are banged up early, but these guys are eager to step in and show off." I agree, and that's something that Coach Franklin has said a lot up to this point, that he puts an emphasis on making sure there is depth on this Penn State team. So any moment he can against Kent State, get some young guys in, get them playing experience. And that's something that he said even when I first got here was, hey, guys, we are going to have a team that if we need to rely on some younger guys, we're going to be able to do it because of the depth that we have built, giving guys in-game reps. Another question, and if you are listening on the radio, you can follow along on YouTube at Behind the Wall with Landon Tangwall, and go ahead and comment any question you guys have. We're doing a little bit of a Q&A while I go over Penn State, Illinois. And someone just asked, why do we sub at linebacker and edge? I understand players need breaks, but they take Kobe, Tony, and Abdul out of the game for numerous series. Never seen it so much. I think that's a really good question, honestly. I like that. I think it is a little bit of Coach Franklin, like I said, wanting to build that depth and get guys as many in-game reps as possible. And is that to a detriment to a certain point? I think so. I think when you're constantly taking your best players out of the game, it gets a little bit harder. But also you got to think about it. It keeps them fresh later in the game. But I think you're right. I think you want to limit that a little bit more. There are drives out there where you see Elsdon playing a ton. You see younger guys in for Tony Rojas playing a lot. Same thing, Smith Vilbert and Amin Vanover playing a ton of defensive end and meaningful snaps at that, third downs where it's like, hey, we can get off the field here. So I think there's definitely a want from Coach Franklin to continue to build that depth. And I'd even argue that is one of the biggest things that he puts an emphasis on. And like I said, maybe to his disadvantage a little bit. But I do think he knows what he's doing. And guess what? When guys go down and then people are ready, it's like, okay, thanks for preparing them, Coach Franklin. I mean, Dejon Lane is ready for a reason. And so it's nice we're able to plug him in for KJ Winston. It's nice. I don't know. There's definitely some people. Dakari Nelson is someone that made the transition from safety to linebacker. Now Dom DeLuca out. We were already thin at linebacker, losing a couple guys in the offseason, a couple guys to injuries. Obviously, we had something else. We lost 2 defensive players. So there is a little bit of lack of depth on this defense. And Coach Franklin has to continue to create that, because going down the line into this season, and now we are just starting Big Ten play this year. It feels like we barely played, and we have all these injuries already. We're just now getting into Big Ten play. The guys are going to continue to get banged up. That's how it works. When you are playing in the Big Ten, you will get injured, and you are not going to start the season with the same team, you're not going to end the season with the same team you started it with. So you have to be mindful of that. Someone in the comment section, personally, I think we sub a little too much on both lines, especially at the offensive line. I really appreciate you bringing up that point, because that's something that we haven't talked about that much. And rotating at the offensive line is not something that really happens in football. I will tell you that offensive line and quarterback are the only position on the field that does not rotate. Now, we do for Penn State, even with Bo coming in, the offensive line, we do it. And like I said, I do think sometimes it can mess up the rhythm a little bit. Let's talk about Bo at first. I think you need to be careful if you were Kotelnicki with bringing Bo in too often and kind of messing with Drew's chemistry. You don't want Drew to be, feeling everything's flowing, you're confident, and the next thing Bo comes in for a play or two, and it kind of disrupts that. So I think you utilize Bo in a way where it's not disrupting Drew's game. I don't know if that is on 3rd and short when you're going to run the ball anyways, and you can bring Bo Prabula in, and he presents that run threat where you do a read option. Hey, we have to worry about Bo. That's not really the same thing with Drew, which we will get into a little bit. Drew has become a much better runner up to this point, and that is because he's lost about, I want to say, 8 pounds from last year to this year, and you've seen him use his legs to extend drives. Drew has done a great job of that. There's been multiple 3rd downs this year where he's taken off and gotten the 1st down and extended the drive with his legs, which is not something outside of the Michigan game last year he really has not done. But getting back to rotating at offensive line, I'm going to be honest. I had to do it with Hunter Norzad my 2nd year here. It's not fun. It's not something that you were able to get into a good rhythm because as an offensive lineman, you have to get a feel from that guy across from you. What type of moves does he like to pull out? When it's 3rd down, what is that pass rush move that he is going to go to? Well, when you play for 2 drives and then you get taken out for 2 drives and you get put back in, you start to lose that. You don't have a good feel of what he likes to go to. You're thinking, okay, and then also on top of that, you're looking over your shoulder, worried, saying, hey, if I mess up, I'm getting yanked. And like I said, I can speak to this to myself. That was a fear. It was like, I'm looking over my shoulder. I'm playing Purdue week 1, and I know that me and Hunter Norzad are switching out. And it's like, okay, do not mess up. Do not mess up. He's going to put him in the rest of the game if you give up a sack. So that is when you're rotating people, it starts to mess with your psyche a little bit. So I think you need to be mindful of that if you're Coach Trout, especially in one of these bigger games against Illinois, where you can't afford to put in a tackle and just swap them out just because you want to, and then you give up a sack. That is not in this game. There is going to be very, very small margins of error, and that is not something you can afford to do. So I think you be very mindful if you're Coach Franklin, Coach Trout, and the game coming into this game with a mindset, hey, we're going to rotate a lot. I think we will see a little bit less of that now that we are in the Big Ten play. But let's talk about this Illinois defense for a little bit. I mean, this is the first test that Drew Aller and company have this entire year. We have played some lackluster defenses. And Illinois already have 7 interceptions on the year already. They had 7 interceptions all of last year. Now, those numbers are a little bit inflated because when they played Eastern Illinois, they had a couple takeaways. I think they had 3 or 4 interceptions in that game alone. But it is clear their defensive backs, even losing Witherspoon and then Newton, their defensive tackle, they are almost better at defense. And I had the head 24/7 beat writer on my show. If you want to go check out my pregame show, it's a little bit more concise, and we get into it here. We're doing a lot of Q&A and having fun, but I have him on for about 20 minutes, and he takes us through that Illinois roster, and that's what he said. He said, look, as much as we lost basically 2 first-round talents on this defense, we're almost better. We're almost more talented as a group as an Illinois defense this year. So I thought that was really interesting, and honestly, watching the film, I kind of agree with them, looking at how we stacked up against them last year to how we stack up against them this year. I'm excited because our offense is so much more explosive and we're throwing it down the field. You've seen Drew Aller has taken a shot to Amari Evans in almost every single game, and not almost every single game, and sometimes 2 times in the game. So there is an emphasis by Koto-Nicky to throw it down the field, to get his other wide receivers involved. And we saw that last week. We got Julian Fleming involved. Liam Clifford got involved. So there is – we're spreading the ball around the offense. And talking about getting everybody involved, at halftime against Kent State, there was 6 Penn State players with a reception at halftime. Then on top of that, those 6 players, all of them had 2 or more receptions. So that is how you spread the ball around if you're Andy Koto-Nicky and Drew Aller, and you get everybody involved. You keep everybody happy. It is a day and age where guys can leave any second for the transfer portal. So it's probably a good thing getting these guys involved. But let's talk about this run game for Penn State. And up to this point, we have had 200 rushing yards in every single game. Last week, we went over 300 rushing yards. Only the second time in the Singleton-Allen era, so 2022, week 1, have we went over 300 rushing yards. The only other time they did it was against Delaware early in the season last year. So they did that again against Kent State. So there is, still, as much as Andy Koto-Nicky is explosive and creative in the passing game, he still wants to run the ball. You best believe that. Now, this Illinois rushing defense has been a little bit wishy-washy. Week 1 against this Eastern Illinois, they only let up 49 yards on the ground. Then they go back against Kansas and let up 186 yards on the ground. Central Michigan, 142 yards they let up on the ground. And then Nebraska only had 32 rushing yards. They didn't really need to run the ball. Nebraska was not really trying to run the ball. They wanted to throw it with Dylan Raiola. But, there is a clear emphasis from this Penn State team to run the ball. I am curious to see how they are going to attack this Illinois defense that is strong up front against a Nebraska front that is very veteran. They have a really veteran offensive line in Nebraska. They had 5 sacks against Dylan Raiola, who he's an improviser. They don't compare him to Mahomes. He's not Mahomes. I do not believe that. But they don't compare him to Mahomes for no reason. He is creative. He is elusive in the pocket. And so to get 5 sacks against that quarterback and that offensive line is impressive. But the more impressive number was they had 7 tackles for loss against this Nebraska team. That's all run game right there. So Illinois is getting disruptive, and I will tell you, they like to bring a lot of stunts. So there is a lot of crossing from the defensive linemen, moving around, trying to confuse the offensive line. And the offensive line for Penn State has played good up to this point, but we need to not forget both tackles are young dudes that don't have a ton of playing experience. Drew Shelton at left tackle and then Anthony Donk at right tackle. Drew Shelton has a little bit more. Drew Shelton got to start in the Rose Bowl and got a lot of time his freshman year. But over the past 2 years, these guys haven't seen a lot of action. We are now asking them to go into, an environment against a really good Illinois front 5. Really, they play an odd front. Most teams, you see 4 guys down on the ball. This game, you will see a lot of 5 guys up there. So it is going to be bring your hard hat if you are this Penn State offensive line. Illinois is going to test you and beg you to run the ball on them. Let's see if we can get it going. Let's read some questions from the comment section. And if you guys are listening on the radio, check me out on YouTube at Behind the Wall with Landon Tangwall. You can leave your questions and we will get to them. Somebody said the media coverage of this game has been so annoying. You would think we are the underdogs. They did the same thing for West Virginia too and saw how that played out. Whoever Jay is in the comment section, you're throwing some really good questions. I'll tell you what, I think you're dead on there. Like we went into West Virginia and the feeling was they might beat us, that type of thing. I mean, it feels like more of the same with Illinois. And you see it with the point spread. It came out that Illinois is 19-point underdogs and everybody's shocked. And I think it's right. I mean, when is Vegas wrong? But I think it's right because it's like this team is not as good as us. They're not. They're living on some hype. They went to Nebraska. They handled business against Matt Rule in his second year and Dylan Raiola, who, like I said, is thought to be one of the next top quarterbacks in college football. So there's a lot of hype around them. But I don't really think they're able to come into a top 10 team like Penn State, come into it now, a whiteout, thanks to Coach Franklin asking for that. And so I personally think this is how the game is going to go. I think we start out, the game will be close. We get into the third quarter, and the Penn State team will start to pull away. I think there'll be a turnover. Luke Altmaier will have his first turnover of the year. I am predicting that. And then we will start to pull away. So my final score prediction is 31-17. But I just think that there is a lot of hype around this Illinois team. And that's a great point. It feels like a lot like West Virginia a couple weeks ago, where you saw the pregame show. 3 out of the 4 guys on the pregame show picked West Virginia to win. And that game was never even close. West Virginia didn't even come close to us. Shout out Ryan Mock in the comment section, said, eat your hat, McAfee. Yeah, exactly. So I think, the Illinois team, they're better than West Virginia. I will say that. But they don't exactly scare me. I think a lot of people are afraid just because they're well coached. And that's a credit to Coach Brett Bielema at Illinois. He's doing a fantastic job there. Luke Altmaier is not making any mistakes. And that's the biggest thing. I mean, that is what this game is going to come down to a little bit, is who makes more mistakes. And Coach Franklin talks about it, the turnover battle. That is going to be huge in this game. Whoever wins the turnover battle, in my opinion, is going to win this game. So if Penn State comes out a little bit asleep, has some sloppy turnovers, well, I think then there is an opportunity for Illinois. But if you come out confident, if you're Andy Kotelnicki and Drew Aller, you take care of the football, you score a lot of touchdowns, but, settle for a couple field goals, I think you're okay, because Illinois has not faced a defense like this Penn State defense up to this point. And Luke Altmaier obviously has been impressive, but I just think that those numbers that he has are a little bit inflated just because of the teams they have played up to this point. Someone asked, does Franklin have offensive input during the game, whether to run, pass, for example, or certain play calls? Not really. I mean, a little bit. I mean, he'll say, hey, I think we should run X, Y, Z. But it's more so, he is the game manager. He makes the calls if we're going to go for it on fourth down, which I will say, I think he is a lot more confident in the offense this year and going for it on a fourth down. And I think the reason for that is because they have plays schemed up. Kotonicki, he has a playbook for 4th and 2, 4th and 1, 4th and 3, where we are going to come out and, do something different to the defense. We have seen so many different variations of this offense, and Andy Kotonicki does a great job of just confusing the defense. And Coach Franklin brought that up. He said, it's nice seeing Andy Kotonicki put all this stuff on tape. He's putting a million different things on tape for the defense to have to watch. And what that does is now the defensive coordinator for Illinois has to spend all week preparing for everything. He has to prepare for every single thing he sees on tape. And you might not even bring most of that to the game. You come into the game, let's say you have 100% of your playbook. When you come into a game, you shrink that down to almost, I'd say, less than 50%. I mean, that is really how it looks, because you have your entire playbook, and then the offensive coordinator, Coach Franklin, and let's say Drew Aller will kind of sit down and say, hey, these are the plays we want to go into the game with. And how, maybe I'll try to do a video on this. I'll bring in a script. And there is basically this big page, and it says red zone, third down, extra long, 1st and 10. And it's basically these categories. And it's the plays for those categories. So you look at that and say, hey, this is our favorite third down play for this week. We're going to save that for when we really need it. And honestly, you've seen Andy Kotonicki go back to the same play. If you want to think back to last week against Kent State, the Tyler Warren touchdown threw by Drew Aller, that was the same exact play that Bo Prabula threw a couple quarters later to Khalil Dinkins. Same exact play. Very similar play to what you saw in West Virginia when Bo Prabula threw the touchdown pass to Tyler Warren. So Andy Kotonicki, he's not afraid to return to things that he has seen success with before. I think this game, someone in the comments, Tony Roberts, said, I think this game will resemble Iowa from last year. I think our defense is going to really step up this week. I like that prediction. I do think that Tom Allen has a little bit of a chip on his shoulder after Bowling Green, where, look, Bowling Green, we got to tip our caps to them. They came out with a great game plan, and they executed it really well. Their quarterback had no fear. They were a very senior-heavy team. And I think Tom Allen got a lot of flack for that, especially when Tom Allen came out in the second half and adjusted. He had, in the second half, they let up less than 100 yards, 2 interceptions, and only let up 3 points. So there was a clear adjustment from Tom Allen. And I'd almost argue I like seeing that. I think you like to see the team struggle just a little bit early on. I'd rather struggle a little bit against Bowling Green and come out victorious than go into an Ohio State game and be struggling. And it's like, oh, we haven't been here yet this year. We haven't been tested. This team has already been tested. You think about West Virginia, and we were leading going into that halftime, but then you got to sit there for 2 hours as the away team in a cramped up locker room. You come out, you don't skip a beat. Then you go against Bowling Green. Next thing you know, you get punched in the mouth. You are down 7-17 at home, and you come out and you handle business and you finish that game off. I know it wasn't the most pretty victory, but they did a damn good job, kind of showing up that defense. So I don't think Tom Allen gets enough credit for what he has done. And I think you're right. I think this could be a Tom Allen coming out party, just because I know there's a lot of talk about Illinois and that this offense is really good. I think Tom Allen is going to make them look mighty regular. I like that prediction. I'm going to piggyback on that. Our D-line needs to stop going off sides. Well, hey, we've been saying that as an offensive line for a long time here. That goes back to P.J. Mustafa. Shout out Big P.J. We've had guys on the Penn State defensive line. They love going off sides. That is a tale as old as time. So hopefully that gets fixed. You do have to run for those. Trust me. The defensive linemen are taking a couple laps for those offsides. Can you talk about how Penn State can attack the stunts in the run game? I know Manny Diaz stunted a lot up front and left gaping holes at times when positions are blocked properly. Wow, Jay is coming with some fantastic questions. I think most people don't even know what he just said. So the defensive line, they run stunts. And basically one guy will try to pick someone. The other guy kind of is able to come free and loop around. Now, those work well, and sometimes they work well in pass pro, sometimes they don't. Now, when you run those in run game, it's kind of more of the same thing where it can work. It can be beneficial to you as a defense, and you can get someone free and tackle the running back in the backfield. But then you can also get caught up, and this is what Jay in the comments was referring to. There was a couple times against Michigan in the past couple of years where we would run a stunt and they would catch us just right where the hole was just gaping. So I think you need to be mindful, and that's why a lot of times defenses don't run stunts on anything really except third down. But Illinois is a team that has shown a tendency to be running stunts, to be running blitzes, not just on third down, and try to disrupt the offense. So I'm curious to see what Tom Allen what kind of game plan he's going to come out with. Is he going to try to go at them and attack them and see, hey, what are you really made of? Or is he going to sit back and kind of see what Luke Altmaier and that Illinois offense is bringing to the table and go from there and say, okay, this is how we're going to go about it and maybe adjust in the second half. Now, one thing I do want to talk about before we get to some more questions, and please continue to leave those questions in the comment section. If you are listening online, check me out at Behind the Wall with Landon Tangwall on YouTube, and you can leave those questions below. So one thing I do want to talk about is the addition that has been made to college football of the headsets on the sideline. So now quarterbacks and now normally the middle linebacker can get a green dot on their helmet. And what that green dot means is they have a microphone in their helmet. Only one player on each side of the ball is allowed to have a microphone in their helmet at once. And there was some questions about what happened to that defense at Bowling Green for Penn State. Well, they basically came out, and I've heard this. Kobe King said it was really difficult to hear Tom Allen because he basically said he sounds like Darth Vader on the mic, which I think is a pretty hilarious comparison. But it's right. Tom Allen, his voice a little rough, a little scratchy. So now they have passed over those duties to Dan Connor. Yes, that Dan Connor, he is on the staff, legendary Penn State linebacker from back in the 2000s. So he is now responsible with communicating with Kobe King. But that is something that was kind of talked about. We think that there was some mistakes made by the team against Bowling Green because they basically couldn't understand Tom Allen because his voice is that raspy and he yells so much. It's like, okay, let's give this to Dan Connor. And as much as Dan Connor is like a silent assassin, I mean, you guys know how he played out here, but he doesn't really talk much. He kind of goes about his business and he does a fantastic job. That's someone I think is going to climb up the coaching ranks very quickly. But getting kind of his start here at Penn State, he is now taking over those responsibilities, communicating in the headset to Kobe King. So I'm excited to see that's going to be the first week of this. And the other piece of that, too, is they added tablets to the sideline. So if you ever think about your favorite quarterback in the NFL, Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, spiking those tablets into the bench of the sideline after they throw an interception, well, now we have those two in college football. So there is an opportunity for offense and defenses to now adapt in game a little bit. And that might not sound a lot like the average fan, but I will tell you, when you come off the field after a drive, no matter if it's a 3-play drive or a 15-play touchdown drive, you go sit down and the coaches say, okay, what happened out there? Tell me what defenses were they running? What kind of blitzes were they bringing? And it's hard to remember. You just got your head smashed in for like 10 plays. You're trying to kill the dude across from you. And now you have to go sit down and kind of use your brain and try to tell the coach what's going on. So it was really difficult. And Coach Trout used to have a whiteboard on the sideline. And if it was raining, like it might be a little bit tomorrow, he'd try to write on the whiteboard. It wouldn't even work. And then we just throw it away and say, hey, whatever, we'll check the film out later tonight. Well, now there's an opportunity having the tablets on the sideline where we can look at that right now. We can make the adjustment right now. So now, who's the better coach? Who's the better in-game coach who can make adjustments when you need them? So that it kind of adds another element to the game. And Tom Allen is also will be up in the booth, it seems. He was up there last game, and he has kind of done both. And so Coach Franklin said we will kind of take it as it comes and see if we want him to stay up there. But let's get back to these questions in the comment section. What type of plays do you think would work against this Illinois defense? How would you attack them? Asked Ryan Mock. I like that question. I think you come out and you rely on your run game to start. I don't ever want to put the pressure on Drew Aller again of saying, hey, you have to win us this game. Now, there's going to be times where that's going to have to happen, and we need him to step up. But I don't think you go into games doing that off rip, especially when you have an offensive line that has rushed for over 200 yards in every single game up to this point, and two running backs that I think is the best duo in all of college football. So that is where I'm going. I'm saying, hey, let's lean on this ground game and get them going, and then that will kind of open up the offense. Now, I will say the other thing I want to see, Ryan, out of this offense is I want to see Drew Aller continue to stretch the field. just because we're playing a little bit of a better defense that has created a lot of turnovers so far doesn't mean we need to stop trying to be creative and stop trying to stretch the field. I'm sure that's a stat that has been talked about in the meetings. Hey, they have a ton of turnovers. We have to play turnover-free football. But that doesn't mean you stop yourself from trying to take some shots and take a little bit of risk. And that is what we've seen from Drew Aller so far this year that we didn't see last year, is he was a little shy. There was a couple of times where it didn't really, we walked away from games like, hey, we're not passing the ball down the field. We need to throw it down the field. Shout out Corey Geiger, if anybody's familiar with that. He asked Coach Franklin after one of the games, why don't we just chuck it deep pretty much? He got a lot of flack for that. And now it's kind of the running joke that, hey, we are chucking it deep now, and it is working. And the reason it's working is because not only Amari Evans has really become a deep threat, but Drew Aller's confidence, and I think that's through Andy Kotelnicki. When you start throwing it deep and stretching the field, it opens everything else up. You notice Nick Singleton is a little bit more explosive. His explosiveness hasn't changed from last year to this year. People asked Chuck Losey, that the strength coach, and they said, hey, where did his speed go last year? It's back now. And Chuck Losey said, hey, it didn't go anywhere. And obviously Losey can't really say anything, but I'll be the one to say it. It's because the offensive coordinator is different, and they are scheming different ways to get Nick Singleton the ball in space. They are getting outside, and that's something we haven't done a lot here at Penn State. We haven't run outside zone. We haven't run pin and pull, and that is a variation of something that gets you outside in the run game. You're seeing a ton of jet sweeps from this Penn State offense, also something that we really haven't run. And then something else to keep in mind, I said we're running a lot of jet sweeps. We're also running a lot of fake jet sweep motions. And what that does is it messes with the defense. So tomorrow night, when you're just kind of watching, take a watch at that pre-snap motion. Watch what happens and how it kind of the defense instantly moves. I want you guys to watch that and kind of notice that. You start to look at that. And it's like, okay, there's a reason for that. There's a reason that Andy Kotelnicki wants to do that. So, yeah, keep an eye on that if you're a fan. Yo, Landon, do you think that Drew needs to have a connection with any particular receiver on the team? Tyler Warren was great last week, and Harrison Wallace week 1. Who should step up? I think the wide receiver by committee isn't the worst thing in the world. Now, I will say Amari Evans has been pretty consistent up to this point. Now, I would like to see us get him a little bit more involved, and he is the fastest wide receiver on this team. And I think there's opportunity to do that. You put Amari Evans in the backfield. You put him in the slot position, bring him on some jet sweeps, get him the ball in space. I was just talking about getting Nick Singleton the ball in space. Do the same thing with Amari Evans. So I do want to see that. I want to see Drew continue to spread the ball around. We saw Julian Fleming get a couple really nice catches over the middle. I got a shout out. I talked about this on my show earlier this week, but shout out Julian Fleming, Tyler Warren, Liam Clifford. Those boys came with a beer chug celebration after their touchdown, smashing a beer can over their head. And then I hope to see more of that. I don't know if they got in trouble for that. I hope not. I didn't post it on Twitter because I didn't want them to get in any trouble. But I like seeing the celebrations. And I bring that up because it's cool. But it also tells you, like, offenses starting to plan out celebrations and touchdown dances. You're having fun. And I can speak firsthand. No one was having too much fun on this Penn State offense in the past couple of years. It was like, hey, we're winning, but are we winning how we want to? Does it feel good walking away? And it didn't always. So I think the guys are having fun. Now the question is just how can you continue to get the wide receivers involved in different ways? And I think that's how it's going to be the rest of the season, where there's going to be games where people say, hey, where was Trey Wallace? But then there's going to be games where he pops off like he did against West Virginia. Same thing with Amari Evans. I am sure there will be games where he has no catches, but someone else is going to step up. That might be a Liam Clifford game. So I will say, though, the constant deep threat of Amari Evans, it's very enticing to me, because I think when you put him on the field, the defensive coordinator for the opposing team, his antenna goes up and says, oh, crap, okay, we need to be mindful, step back a couple yards, and guess what that does? Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, instead of a 3-yard run, it's a 5-6 yard run, just because you're stretching that defense a little bit more. Jake in the comment section says, it seems like we have a committee group like Josh Allen in Buffalo. I kind of like that comparison. Sorry, I lost your comment. If this will be okay as we prepare for Ohio State, USC, Washington. Yeah, so kind of talking about the wide receiver by committee, I like it, like I said, and I think it's okay if you continuously kind of have a new guy step up every week. Now, where I question that a little bit is in crunch time. Like you said, Ohio State, USC, and there's 2 minutes left, and Drew needs to drive down the field. If you have a true guy like Trey Wallace felt in week 1, it's like, I have a guy I can rely on. I'm going to go to him no matter what. And I have trust that he will go make a play for me if I give him a 50-50 jump ball. And I think Trey Wallace is that guy outside of Tyler Warren that you would want to, go up and be able to win you a 50-50 ball if you're Drew Aller. He's that guy, but kind of disappeared a little bit, hasn't seen a ton of targets, but it feels like he's always doing what he needs to do, Trey Wallace. Now, Amari Evans is continually just drawing PIs, getting deep. I mean, Drew Aller's a couple plays, and people said, hey, Drew Aller might have underthrew him a little bit on a couple of those deep passes, but, I mean, he was putting it 60 yards in the air. It's hard to sling that thing. It's a pretty big football. So, to answer your question, does it worry me a little bit that we do not have a full, truly established number one wide receiver? Yes, a little bit. I think that will come with time. Now, if we're going into Ohio State in November and it's still, we don't really have a number one guy, I don't think that's necessarily cause for panic, because if you have a good group of wide receiver by committee, the best tight end in college football, and the best running back duo in college football, and then also an offensive line that's young, but they are starting to come along, you have all that. That's not the worst thing. You don't need a dominant number one, but if you want to win the college football playoffs, you do. I'll put that out there. I think Trey Wallace would have to really emerge as a number one guy if we want to be true contenders. Because, I think Penn State fans, and this has kind of been the theme the past couple years, is we're done with 10 wins, even 11 wins. We want to actually win something. We want to win a Big Ten championship. We want to win the national championship, or at least compete for it. And so, I'm saying all these things, hey, it's good enough. It's good enough. So I'm kind of backtracking real quick, but it's not really good enough to win a natty and beat Georgia and beat Alabama. So there is some of that. So I am excited to see. And I think this weekend against Illinois, Kotoniki, Drew, as much as they have had a good year so far, there's a little bit of something to prove. You are playing the first at all good defense. West Virginia, Bowling Green, and surely Kent State are not good defenses. So there is a little bit of a test here. Let's see if Drew Aller is up to it. I think defensive communication, my man, appreciate it. Yeah, you said you got a question. Oh, that was you? Oh, my man, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Absolutely. Appreciate the support, man. We got a couple. Come on down to Campus Stakes. We are here. I haven't really taken too much of a break so far. We got too much good stuff going on, but come on down to Campus Stakes on Pew Street downtown. If you're going to be out tonight, if you were in town, come on that late night. They'll be open. Best believe they will be open till 3 a.m. And also Sunday morning, come out. Bo Pagula will be here Sunday morning for a signing, 10 to 11 a.m., signing his signature cup. So if you want to get anything signed by Bo, come on by. It'll be a really good time. We will all be in here hanging out. Landon, do you think Drew needs to have a connection? Oh, I'm sorry. I read that one. Sorry. Scrolled up a little bit too much. Let's get back down. I'm calling my shot now. Jalen Harvey is going to be a guy. Everyone loves Granville, and I do too, but don't sleep on Harvey. Explosive and bendy already. Yeah, I think that's a good point. I've kind of seen him, got to play a little bit. He looks good. Also the cousin of Chop Robinson, if those do not know. So bending and getting around the corner does run in the family for Jalen Harvey. How would you rate our offensive line run blocking / pass blocking so far this season? Are we better at one over the other? I think we're probably better running the ball. I don't think we've played any true elite defensive line, not even really anything close to an elite defensive line or elite defensive end. And I don't think we're going to see an elite defensive end until Ohio State in November. So we got a little bit of time for this young offensive line to gel together, because I think that is one of the hardest things as a new offensive line where you have 3 new starters. It's okay, can the group play well together? Because offensive line is the only group in all of sports that 5 people have to move in unison to make a play happen. And that's why you don't see so many touchdown plays nowadays, is because if one person is wrong out of the 5, the play is blown up. Shout out the 1994 Penn State offensive line, my guy, Big Keith Goon Conlon, Marco Rivera, Andre Johnson, a couple other guys. They parted the seas for Kajana Carter. Only let Kerry Collins get hit 3 times, sacked 3 times all year. So that, I mean, when you have an elite offensive line, you guys, if you were around for 94, you've seen what it's like. I wanted to bring them up because Penn State is honoring the 1994 Rose Bowl champs in between the first and second quarter in Beaver Stadium. It'll be 30 years this January since Penn State won that Rose Bowl, one of only 2 Rose Bowl victories in Penn State football history. The other one, 2022, that was a part of that one. That was fun. So, yeah, keep an eye on that. I'll be putting out some really cool stuff coming out soon on that 94 Rose Bowl team. So be on the lookout for that. What kind of coach is James Franklin in the locker room? I like these questions, you guys. Ask these type of questions because I think this is where we get, people really enjoy this type of stuff. For example, if you guys are playing poorly at halftime, is he more of a yeller or a calm coach or anything else you'd like to add about his coaching style? Coach Franklin does a really good job of staying calm, cool, collected. He doesn't come in and just start screaming. Like, that's not his mantra at all. He calms us down. Hey, I love you guys. We got this. We know our game plan. We're confident. It's more kind of bring everybody back together. If he senses, hey, there's some stuff busting at the seams, we're lacking a little bit here, he is going to come together, bring everybody back. But I mean, don't get me wrong. He's going to yell if you need to get yelled at. There are times where you have to yell. You can't always just be, Mr. Nice Guy. But I will say his in-game coaching, I always felt, number one, I felt prepared. And I think that's something that people ask going into Ohio State and going into Michigan over the past couple of years. It's like they don't look prepared. I promise you, I felt prepared every single time going into those games. Sometimes teams are just a little bit better. And I think people are like, hey, why can we continuously not beat Ohio State? And trust me, I feel that. We have to watch the same Marcus Allen block kick over and over. I want to beat Ohio State. But also when you look at it, guess where Penn State finishes most year? Anywhere between 7, 8 to like 12 for the most part. And guess where they finish in recruiting for most years? 7, 8, 9, 10 in that same area. Might have a top 3 class every once in a while. So the recruiting rankings are a direct reflection of how you finish in college football rankings. Georgia finishes pretty much number 1 in recruiting every year. And guess what? They're number 1. So when you are constantly playing an Ohio State team where this year, 2025, Ohio State has 3 of the top 6 players in the entire nation committed to them. They have, 10 guys inside the top 100. It is just far and away better than what Penn State has committed. So I think you will see that reflect down the road. There's only so much that coaches can do. You can't really, if a team is just that much better than you, they're going to win. Hoping that they do something to honor Joe along with that. Yeah, I do too, man. Joe is the reason Penn State is here today and the reason why we are all here. Lord knows I will do everything in my power to continue to honor Joe as much as possible and those teams that came before us. So be on the lookout, like I said, for a lot of cool content like that. I'm the biggest PSU fan in the state of Georgia. We are dealing with the hurricane. What's the weather supposed to be like for the game? Well, prayers out to you because I know it's a little rough down there in Georgia, but it is currently raining here in State College. If you are tailgating tomorrow, it's going to be kind of cloudy, rainy all day. It'll be on and off, so definitely wear your rain jackets to the tailgates tomorrow. But it seems like going into the game, there's not going to be too much weather that affects us. I don't think the hurricane's going to come too far up the East Coast. So hopefully it doesn't affect us too much. But if you are down listening in the southern region, prayers out to you guys. Hope everybody is safe. What's the angriest you've ever seen, James Franklin? Obviously I can't answer that, but we got a little fan in the background right here if you're watching live. We are at Campus Steaks, downtown State College. Stop by on Pew Street. They are open until 2 a.m. And if it is packed, they are open later than 2 a.m. So stop by tonight if you need yourself a little late night snack after you enjoy some afternoon beverages. I got to think, what's something that I can share about Coach Franklin being mad? Probably not. It's fun. You always you get to see every coach get to their point where, they really get mad and you get yelled at, and everybody gets yelled at to a certain extent. That's something you're used to as a football player. I will say I never had Coach Franklin too mad at me. So that is the good news. That is the main goal. You want to try your best not to get yelled at by the head coach. That's why we need to step it up with NIL, Ryan Mock says. I think you were referring to earlier when I said Ohio State is really just beating us out in recruiting. That's a good point. And I think there's a lot of NIL regulations coming where we are going to be told what we can and can't do. NCAA is going to step in a little bit more. And also, I think universities are going to be able to pay players directly, which is going to be a big difference. Jay said they also have $20 to $30 million roster. Yeah. That's the difference now in the transfer portal. When you have money to throw at guys, you can get some really talented guys out of the portal, out of, the number 1 guy in the recruiting class. I mean, now if you're looking at a 5-star, there's only about 35 stars in each class. You're going to have to pay them close to $1 million. I'm going to be honest. So does Penn State have $1 million to just shell out to a 5-star? Probably not, because however much money they have, they're saying, hey, we need to divvy it up this much. We don't have the top dollars to be going after these elite guys. So you're right. If we are not able to keep up in NIL, I don't know what we're going to do. You're going to fall behind. So we better figure that out quickly. Tony Roberts says, do you think they will ever put Joe's statue back up where it belongs? If I'm being honest with you, probably not. But, I think a lot of us want to continue to honor Joe, and that's kind of why I do all my Paterno era content. If you are listening along, this is Landon Tangwall, former offensive lineman for Penn State. And I check me out on YouTube at Behind the Wall with Landon Tangwall, where I posted some really cool stuff. Spider Caldwell is the equipment manager for 30 years for Joe Paterno, and we did a walkthrough of his office of Beaver Stadium, and he showed some really cool things, pictures, the final shoes that Joe wore. I posted this during the bye week about 2 weeks ago, so go check that out if you haven't seen it yet. But no, I don't think the Joe statue will go back up. Wear whatever, but bring the energy. Franklin Fanatic. I'm curious, are you guys all going to wear white tomorrow? I'm curious to see that. I'm definitely going to wear white. But I'm excited to see how much of the stadium is going to buy into the whiteout energy. I've seen a couple people on Twitter say, hey, I'm not wearing anything white. This isn't official whiteout. So if we got any negative Nancys in the chat, let me know if you're not going to wear white. I'm curious. Where does the Penn State stack up in NIL right now compared to other Big Ten teams, top teams nationally? Pretty far behind, I'm going to be honest. And I think it's remarkable. And this is a testament to Coach Franklin and what he's done. He really has had great retention rates of the roster. You look around the Big Ten, Northwestern and Penn State both had, I think, about 13 or 14 transfers. That was the lowest in the Big Ten. You look at a team like Michigan, and I get it. They just won a national championships. They have everything that's going on. They lost their head coach. So there was a lot of turnover. Michigan had like 40 guys leaving the transfer portal. So, we're doing a good job with what we have of making sure that we're, trying to do with what we can with what we got. I think, let's see, and we're going to continue to read a couple more. It's hard to stay at Ohio State's level because they have Fortune 500 companies donating. I mean, that's a fact. They simply are just able to fund their football program more than us. So there is obviously there's a lot of things that go into that. There's the fact that, and people don't talk about this enough, we are in State College. I'm sitting in State College. There's not many Fortune 500 companies in State College. But guess what? You go to Ann Arbor, you go to other places all around Georgia, that type of thing. They are in huge cities where these companies want to get involved, where these companies have a lot of money to help out. You go to a small mom and pop shop, they don't got 10 grand to give to Drew Aller and Nick Singleton. That's not how it works. They have a couple hundred. Hey, I got $250 for you to come do this signing at my shop. And nowadays that doesn't really cut it. So I think not only do they have these big boosters, they also have the backing of the town where, hey, we're able to support you guys. We're going to be able to give your players deals. You don't have that as much here at Penn State. So I think that is definitely something to kind of think about. Yeah, he said, Franklin Fanatic said, I can't promise what I wear, but my voice will be blown out by Sunday. Me too, man. It's going to be a good one. I'm excited to see, we haven't had a night game in Beaver in a while, so it's first one of the year. It should be a lot of fun. I think this is a really good Illinois team. I do think they're slightly overhyped in the realm of Luke Altmaier and that offense. The defense is also a little bit overinflated just because of stats they racked up against lower level teams, but nonetheless, a well-coached team that takes care of the football, doesn't turn the football over, gets a lot of turnovers, and has run the ball well up to this point. When I mentioned their running back is 6'3", 250. So I'm excited to see Drew Aller, and I'll give you guys this. We got 1 minute left. I will say feed Katron Allen. Penn State is 10-0 when Katron Allen has 80 or more rushing yards. Use that stat at the tailgate tomorrow. Penn State is 10-0 when Katron Allen has 80 or more rushing yards. So get him involved, get him the ball, keep the ball on the ground with Nick Singleton, and stretch this thing out. I love the conversations we're having, guys. Please come back every home game, 3 to 4 p.m. I will be live at Campus Stakes. So you can hop in my YouTube at Behind the Wall with Landon Tangwall, have these good conversations. I really appreciate you guys. Yeah, Fat Man, he's active tomorrow. If anybody doesn't know, Fat Man is Katron Allen's nickname. And I think it's going to be a big day for him and this Penn State offensive line. So I appreciate you guys tuning in. I will be at Campus Stakes every Friday, 3 to 4 p.m. at home games. Check us out Sunday mornings. Bo Prabula will be at Campus Stakes this Sunday, 10 to 11 a.m. for a signing. So come by and check that out. I appreciate you guys tuning in. Like, comment, subscribe. Talk to you guys soon.